Okay, I want to move on in my life story into the period of time at secondary school. And as I told you in a previous video, I failed my 11 plus, so I went to Park Barn Secondary School. It was a relatively new school, and it was about a 30-minute walk from my house. And so in those days I didn't have a bike. Anyway, let me describe the let's say the first 3 years there. Arriving as a 11 and a half year old, we were actually all ferried into a separate playground by the teachers to protect us from the older lads there. And I can always remember being terrified of a couple of boys, older boys, who had the reputation of having been to a detention centre, and one particularly nasty piece of work had already had a stretch in Borstal, and so we were very, very wary of these boys coming into our little pen and trying to get us to start doing favours for them for money, and so that was my first memory. Into the classroom, we were all put into different classes based on a perceived ability, and I was put in 1T, which was regarded as the best of the first years. However, by the time I got to the end of that year and took the tests, I made such a mess of it that I was put down a class for the second year and went into 2H. Now in 2H I flourished. I was particularly good at maths, and I quickly became the best in the class. 2H were students who, let's be quite frank, weren't the brightest thing on the planet, and it was fairly easy for me to shine in virtually all subjects. So I quickly then got put into 3S, and there, this again was one of the top classes, and there I met two boys who were to become very close friends. One was David Weaver, who was an extremely tall young boy, gangly, if I can describe him as that, and the other was Simon Jarvis. Now, he was a very talkative young man who displayed a lot of confidence, and also he was attracted by some of the young girls at an early age, I do recall. So there was always a pang of envy or jealousy. Envy, I think it's probably better, towards him. And the three of us got on like a house on fire, and shared similar sporting interests. And we later indulged in football being played after school, and I was quite good at football. In fact, I was in the school team at an early age. Both Dave and Simon were on the fringes of the team, and Simon occasionally played, but I was a regular. However, in the second year, I got dropped for being too fat, so I lost a fair bit of weight and got my place back within a few months. Now, to the teachers, well, obviously teachers are very, very important at that age, and we had some interesting ones. In the first year, I can remember we had a history teacher called Priestley. He was a very small man, but he frightened the daylights out of us, and he had a habit of dealing with naughty boys by putting the ruler on its edge and smacking it across your knuckles. And it certainly got people's attention. And once he'd done that a couple of times, he had no management problems in his class. Also, we started learning French, and it was quickly evident, I think this was in the second year, or maybe the third year, our teacher was Mrs. Jackson. Her husband taught chemistry, and Mrs. Jackson introduced us to the fun and entertainment of the language lab. That was when we listened to French and repeated it, but we were also able to home in on other people's speaking, and so that became great fun because we ended up having little private chats with each other and forgot about the French. I didn't learn too much, although I can still remember quelle est-il and a few nouns. Okay, what else did we have? Well, we had Mr. Sheen. I think I'll talk about him in the second part. He was an English teacher. And Messrs. Rodwell and Fitzgerald. I'll save that for the part 2. What other stuff can I talk about at this stage? Not really too much. That just about sums up the early stages of schooling up until the third year when we were approaching the age of 14. Okay, so I'll do another part on school shortly.